Okay, let's unpack this. We are treating this stack of sources, from Cicero's final agonizing political testament, De Officiis, to Marcus Aurelius's raw wartime note, not as abstract relics of dead philosopher.
No, not at all.
We're treating them as a high-stakes strategic manual for survival. This is a deep dive into what we're calling the physics of character, the immutable, the non-negotiable laws that govern personal resilience when the structures of the external world inevitably begin to collapse.
And what's immediately striking is the sheer desperation and urgency underlying both of these texts.
Exactly.
I mean, Cicero wrote On Duties in 44 BC, literally during the final months of the Roman Republic. He knew the foundations were crumbling right before his own execution.
And Marcus Aurelius.
He is composing his meditations during the brutal Marcomannic Wars and the devastating Antonine Plague.
So these aren't peacetime philosophical musings.
Not even close. They are blueprints for enduring existential stress, and they were forged in absolute fire.
And our listener, you are looking for those foundational principles that cut through the sort of smoke of daily noise to find the fire of true stability.
Right.
So our mission today is to analyze the requirements for what we are defining as the architecture of integrity. And for me, I'm obsessed with this concept of the hidden costs here.
Okay.
The financialization of moral compromise, what we're calling the mathematical debt, that's accumulated by anyone who attempts to live a bifurcated secret life.
Yeah.
Where their inner ledger just doesn't match their public actions.
And that concept of debt, it really defines the crisis they were responding to. They saw character, for better or worse, as an engineered structure.
An engineered structure. I like that.
Yeah, and if you build it weakly, it fails under stress. So the Stoics provided the literal blueprint for a counter-strategy, the zero-symmetry life.
Zero symmetry.
We're talking about the ultimate anti-fragility, a character structure where the internal and external ledgers match perfectly, which renders it fundamentally impervious to external seizure or collapse.
So, okay, here's the plan. We'll use Cicero to set the foundation, the required civic and political engineering standards, to prove that shortcuts are actually liabilities.
And then we turn to Marcus Aurelius.
Exactly. Then we turn to Marcus Aurelius and the Stoic tradition to build the actual interior mechanism, that unseizable inner asset, which had it so brilliantly termed the Inner Citadel. So to lay this foundation, we have to start with the cornerstone, Cicero's De Officiis, written for his son, Marcus Minor. But you can tell it was really intended as a spiritual testament for the entire elite of the dying republic.
And you have to remember, Cicero was trying to synthesize Greek philosophical rigor, primarily Stoicism, and make it palatable for the highly pragmatic, results-oriented Roman political class.
So it wasn't just a book on morality.
No, it was a political survival guide. It established a blueprint for moral conduct that, as you mentioned, survived the collapse of the very republic it was trying to protect.
And it influenced Western thought for millennia.
For millennia. Cicero's whole purpose was to establish what constituted correct action in public life, and he framed this immediately through a really critical tension.
The tension being between honor and utility.
Exactly.
What is honorable is what aligns with virtue and the public good things like wisdom, justice, greatness of spirit, moderation, all the classics.
Right. And what is useful or utilitous is simply what benefits private necessity like wealth, power, or health.
So in the first two books, he defines these, but then in book 3, he gets to the messy reality.
He tackles the collision.
A potential collision.
Yeah, that's the critical pivot point, isn't it? Book 3 investigates the circumstances where an action might appear useful for my private gain, but it's simultaneously dishonorable, potentially harming the state or another person.
So Cicero's entire argument for integrity rests on resolving this conflict.
He forces the reader to confront the question, can I benefit myself at the expense of justice or the public good and actually get away with it?
And his answer is a resounding structural no.
Not just a moral objection.
No, it's an engineering failure.
Precisely. This is Cicero's core proof. Shortcuts are not temporary gains, they are always long-term strategic liabilities. His insight is that moral honor and social utility are, at a fundamental level, inseparable.
Inseparable.
You cannot have true, sustained utility if it contradicts honor.
But practically, why? I mean, let's make this real. If a general, for instance, lies to the Senate about the extent of a threat just to secure more funding for his own campaign, a classic Roman move, He gets the short-term utility.
He gets the funding. He gets the power.
So Cicero argues that this immediately introduces structural instability.
Hmm.
But where does that liability actually come from?
It comes from violating the foundational community of rational beings.
Mhm.
For the Stoics, and Cicero fully adopted this, humanity exists in a cooperative structure governed by reason.
Okay.
So when the general lies, he violates justice, one of the four cardinal virtues, and justice is the bond of the human community. When you break that bond, even secretly, you degrade the entire structure.
So the cost isn't immediate.
The cost isn't borne by the general right away. It's recorded as instability, a crack in the foundation that the external environment will inevitably exploit later. The integrity of the whole system is compromised, even if the utility goal is momentarily achieved.
So honor isn't some luxury item. It is the required engineering standard for long-term survival.
Both for the republic and for the individual within it. It's almost an economic view of ethics, really.
You're trading a finite temporary gain for infinite compounding risk.
That's the crux of it. The moment we sacrifice justice or honesty for some perceived private advantage, we introduce a moral contradiction that is just fundamentally destabilizing.
And in the Roman context, this was happening everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. The Republic was dying precisely because too many powerful men were prioritizing their private utility, their wealth, their land, their power over public honor. Cicero was watching his entire world collapse because of this exact failure in character architecture.
The sources also connect this failure to the Stoic concept of the discipline of action. So when we substitute principled action with this frantic chase for utility, what's the result?
The result is defined as frivolity. The Greek is aikaios.
Frivolity.
Yeah, and the sources describe this as the agitation of a puppet or a jumping jack. It's action at random, lacking a rational, anchored goal that serves the human community.
That's such a powerful image. The person who lacks honor is just constantly twitching, moving, reacting, but they're never actually acting with purpose.
That's it.
Can we draw a modern parallel? I mean,
Yeah.
what does that frantic movement of aikaios look like today?
Oh, think of a modern leader or a corporate figure who's constantly reacting to social media trends, chasing fleeting relevance, or shifting their stated values week by week based on the current market reaction.
Right.
They're substituting principled action, which is anchored in consistent values honor, for frantic, random movement designed solely for short-term survival or approval utility.
They look busy. They look agitated.
But they lack a core direction. Cicero would say they're demonstrating the primary symptom of moral contradiction: exhausting, unprincipled, and ultimately self-destructive action.
So the moment you choose the shortcut, you commit yourself to a life of frantic damage control.
You're substituting principled action, which is calm because it's rationally aligned with frantic, random movement. That lack of honor forces this aikaios.
And this civic failure, this failure to adhere to the foundational virtue of justice, it leads directly to the internal accounting problem we need to tackle next.
It sets the stage for the collapse. Once you accept Cicero's premise that a shortcut creates a long-term strategic liability, the critical next question for any strategic thinker is, where exactly is that liability recorded? How does the universe keep score?
And the answer? For the Stoics.
The answer is the shadow ledger.
We're moving from the forum to the soul, from the political ledger to the moral physics of the individual. Okay, now we transition from civic duty to internal accounting. The Stoics had a brutally objective physics of character. So to understand the debt, we have to first understand the fundamental dogma.
Which is?
Only moral good virtue is a true good, and only moral evil vice is a true evil.
And this is completely non-negotiable. It's the law of the universe as they saw it. Everything else, wealth, power, health, reputation, a long life, even your own body, is categorized as indifferent.
It's cool.
They're just tools. They are not inherently good or bad. They have utility, sure, but they have zero moral value.
Okay, but wait, this is where that dynamic tension with Cicero comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cicero spent a lot of time defining what is useful. If wealth and health are useful, but the Stoics just classify them as indifferent, how do we reconcile that? Doesn't a strategic person need to acquire wealth and health?
That's an excellent point, and it's the key difference between Stoic rigor and Roman pragmatism. Cicero, the pragmatic statesman, said these things are useful for the functioning of the community.
Right.
The Stoic philosopher, Marcus Aurelius, said they have zero intrinsic value toward achieving true happiness or moral perfection. The strategic person can acquire them, sure. But the moment they start believing these indifferent things are themselves the source of ultimate happiness or worth compromising virtue for, they have begun the process of moral corruption.
Okay, so let's calculate the mathematical debt based on that distinction. The compromised life, the secret life, it attempts to derive absolute infinite value, true happiness, security, meaning from indifferent finite things.
From power, money, fleeting pleasure.
Exactly.
That's the calculation. You are attempting to leverage a morally neutral or finite asset, a temporary position, a sum of money, to secure the infinite value of virtue. You're organizing your entire existence, your deepest intentions, around acquiring something that fundamentally cannot deliver the promised return.
You're placing an infinitely large bet on zero.
You are, and this creates a profound metaphysical debt because your entire internal valuation system is built on a contradiction of reality.
It's essentially a cosmic margin call, just waiting to happen. You have shorted reality by assigning infinite value to transient, morally neutral things.
Can we give a concrete example of this debt accrual in action?
Sure. Take the modern figure who builds a massive reputation, say a powerful CEO on the foundation of public philanthropy and virtue signaling.
Okay.
But secretly, they engage in deceitful, unjust practices, violating Cicero's honor to secure that wealth, the indifferent thing. They believe the wealth and the public praise are true goods.
Right. They've made the fundamental error.
Every single day they maintain that lie. They're accumulating debt. Their internal ledger, the shadow ledger, it doesn't record the public acts of philanthropy. It records the secret acts of vice, the reason which is vitiated and depraved, which just grows stronger through use. And the consequence of maintaining this internal contradiction is, it's profound. The sources describe the non-sage, the person unaware of their moral bankruptcy, as suffering from an almost universal corruption.
Because they are constantly mistaking these false appearances for the true good.
And the immediate internal result is self-destruction. The non-philosopher is described as being in contradiction and at war with himself.
The external battle to maintain the reputation is absolutely nothing compared to the civil war that's raging inside, where their vitiated reason is constantly clashing with the remnant of universal reason.
Marcus Aurelius, who had to deal with this type of contradiction every single day in the Roman court, he captures the painful reality beautifully in his notes.
What does he say?
He observes how difficult the ways of life of the men around him are to put up with, not to say that he can scarcely put up with himself.
Wow. That insight is devastating. The secret life built on these false value judgments, it just generates an inescapable internal friction. You become the worst company to yourself.
And the debt accrues.
The debt accrues because vice, that corrupted reason, acquires strength and vigor, making the lies easier, the compromises smoother, until the individual is wholly defined by that internal war.
So the debt accrues because the individual's actions diverge from the reason common to all intelligent beings, violating the sacred linkage of the world that holds everything together. You are actively fighting the universal operating system, the logos.
And that system, governed by reason and destiny, it does not tolerate infinite imbalance. Just as a physical structure under too much load will fail, a character structure built on a moral deficit must be settled.
The universe cannot allow a long-term moral bankruptcy.
It can't. So when we're discussing the inevitable settlement of the shadow ledger, we have to state this clearly. The bill always comes due.
It's not a threat, it's physics. The external crisis, the scandal, the political failure, the loss of health, that doesn't cause the collapse.
No, it just reveals it.
It merely triggers the inevitable settlement of the pre-existing self-imposed mathematical debt. The structure collapses under external pressure because it was already hollow inside.
And that realization that every ethical shortcut you took years ago is just waiting to become a present vulnerability, that is the ultimate motivation for strategic resilience. If we are serious about survival, we have to liquidate that debt immediately.
And how do we do that?
We construct the unseizable asset, the Inner Citadel, which operates strictly on a zero-symmetry ledger.
So how do we go from a state of internal civil war to that perfect congruence?
It requires intense spiritual warfare. It requires training the hegemonicon, the guiding principle, to recognize its own sovereignty.
The Inner Citadel. This phrase, popularized by Pierre Hadot in his work on Marcus Aurelius, it just captures the strategic goal perfectly. We are building the structure that cannot be seized, even when everything external is lost. So what defines its architecture?
Okay, the citadel is the limit of the hegemonicon.
The ruling faculty, the central control tower of the soul.
Exactly where freedom resides. It is the inviolable stronghold of freedom. The entire Stoic argument rests on this one boundary. External things, slight, insult, disease, the chaos of the court, they cannot physically penetrate this boundary. They stay still outside the wall.
So, okay, the body can be harmed, The fortune can be seized, the reputation can be ruined, but the inner self remains untouched.
But how? I mean, most people feel harm the moment the external event happens.
Because most people have abandoned the control tower, the harm never resided in the event itself. It only resides in the judgment the self chooses to place upon the event.
So it's a choice.
It's always a choice. The sources provide that essential analogy. If you successfully suppress the inner discourse that says, I have been harmed, then the harm disappears. It's suppressed.
That is a radical declaration of sovereignty. It means that the only true asset you possess is your power of judgment. Nothing else is genuinely yours.
Nothing. Everything else is loaned to you by nature or destiny.
And building this citadel requires intense, daily spiritual exercises, starting with this exercise of delimiting the self. Yes, Marcus instructs us to separate the self from the body and the vital breath, the transient things we share with animals and plants, and focus only on the intellect, the nous.
The rational core that is yours in the proper sense.
That's the only part.
This process of separation, it sounds like a deliberate psychological and philosophical divorce from things we instinctively identify with. Why is this separation so necessary?
Because our self often becomes hopelessly confused with the things we've attached value to, our health, our expensive watch, our job title.
Right.
We see the body or the emotions as our true identity. But the true, genuine self is the seat of judgment, the power to choose. By delimiting, we establish the boundary of the citadel. Only what is inside that boundary is free. Everything else is subject to fortune.
And a key tool Marcus used to facilitate this detachment was the magnificent cosmic perspective, what's often called the view from above.
Yes, an exercise in detachment by achieving radical scale.
It's all about stripping away false value.
It is. You look down from a vast height and realize your own minuscule place. Asia and Europe are mere corners. The sea is a drop of water. Present time is just a point in eternity.
And when you look down from that altitude, all the frantic political maneuvering, the accumulation of wealth, the petty squabbles, they just lose their magnetic pull.
They seem tiny and puny.
They cease to be worth compromising your integrity over.
Exactly. If your great rival dies or you acquire 1,000,000 gold pieces, both events, when you view them against the backdrop of eternity, are equally meaningless.
It's a powerful preparation for facing death.
It renders the transient nature of life an objective fact, not a personal tragedy. It recalibrates value. The only thing that retains infinite value is the moral good, because that moral good is perfect and complete in the present moment, regardless of the size or duration of the event.
So the Citadel is built on recognizing sovereignty, delimiting the self, and recalibrating value through the cosmic lens. How do we maintain it day to day? This is where Epictetus's 3 disciplines come in, right? The practical training regimen for the watchman.
They are the maintenance schedule for zero-symmetry living. They're interlocking and absolutely essential.
Okay, let's dedicate some serious time to these because this is where the theory becomes truly actionable. First, the discipline of assent. This relates to logic and truth. What is the practical application of this discipline?
This discipline requires refusing to accept any non-objective or non-adequate representation, any fantasia. It's the commitment to not lying, either to oneself or to others. It is the foundation of intellectual honesty.
That sounds simple, but it must be incredibly difficult in practice. How does Marcus train himself to do this?
He confines his guiding principle to what corresponds exactly to reality. The classic example is the bitter cucumber.
The bitter cucumber.
Yeah. If you bite into a cucumber and it's bitter, the objective reality is this cucumber is bitter. That's it.
And
The moment you add any self-pity, moral judgment, or metaphysical complaint, why are there such things in the world? Why must I always be given the bitter one? You have given assent to a false, subjective, self-pitying representation. You have lied to yourself about the nature of the event.
So if I suffer a professional setback, the objective reality is my project failed. The lie, the compromised assent is the universe is against me and I have been harmed unjustly.
Exactly. The first statement is objective. It allows you to learn. The second is a false value judgment that taints the assent, leading directly to anger and despair and accruing more debt.
So the discipline of assent is the constant, rigorous policing of your inner dialogue to ensure fidelity to objective truth. If you can't stop lying to yourself, you can't build the citadel.
You can't.
That makes perfect sense. Absolute fidelity to reality is the only way to avoid generating internal friction. Okay, let's move to the second discipline, the discipline of desire, which corresponds to physics and acceptance. This seems like the hardest one for people to swallow.
Consenting with serenity to events willed by destiny. It is the ultimate acceptance, and it flows directly from the cosmic perspective. Since we are part of the greater organism, the logos, everything that happens to us is necessary for the whole. Therefore, we desire only the good that depends entirely on us, which is virtue.
And everything else.
And we accept all else wholeheartedly. We stop fighting reality.
But how do you wholeheartedly accept catastrophe? I mean, Marcus Aurelius faced plague, war, the loss of multiple children. How do you welcome that portion that destiny is allotted to you?
It's not passive resignation, it's an active act of will. You aren't accepting it because you like it, but because you understand that you are part of a rational, universal system. The event happened because the whole required it.
Right.
Therefore, since you can't control the outcome, you welcome the opportunity the event presents to practice the one thing you can control, your character. Marcus constantly reminded himself, does this stop me from being just, generous, self-controlled, rational?
And the answer is always no.
The answer is always no. If the answer is no, then the obstacle is irrelevant to your true purpose.
So you're turning a perceived failure into a moral laboratory. You use the moment of distress to practice serenity and acceptance. This is the ultimate liquidation of the mathematical debt.
You refuse to assign infinite negative value to an indifferent event.
And finally, the third discipline, the discipline of action, relating to ethics and justice. This brings us right back to Cicero, doesn't it?
It connects the inner work back to the civic duty. This discipline mandates acting in the service of the human community, always with benevolence and discretion, and, crucially,
Without posing.
without posing, meaning without seeking external validation or applause. Your action must be purposeful, directed toward justice and the common good, solely because it's the rational thing to do.
It must be action for the sake of the act itself, not for the outcome or the reputation it might generate.
Right. If you help a neighbor expecting gratitude, you are compromising the purity of the action.
So the three disciplines form this unbreakable triad. Truth, assent, no self-deception, acceptance, desire, no fighting destiny, and service, action, no selfish posing.
And when all three are applied, the character becomes resilient. And that resilience is what we call anti-fragility.
Right. If an external obstacle blocks a planned course of action, the virtuous person doesn't break or stop.
They immediately adapt the virtue.
This is the concept of turning obstacles upside down. Give us a clear, non-abstract example of this in a modern context.
Okay. Imagine a manager who has meticulously planned a major new product launch. That's her discipline of action. Right before the launch, a major competitor releases a similar, superior product.
Okay, the external obstacle.
The obstacle, the competition, has impeded her action. A non-stoic breaks down, rages, or descends into ikaiotes, that frantic random movement.
But the watchman,
The watchman immediately turns the obstacle upside down.
how does she do that?
She converts that external setback into an opportunity to practice other virtues. First, she applies the discipline of assent. The competitor's product is superior. That is objective reality.
No lies.
No lies. Then she accepts the failure of the initial plan. That's the discipline of desire or acceptance. Then she uses that moment to practice justice toward her team by communicating honestly, refusing to assign blame, and refocusing their efforts benevolently. That's the discipline of action again. So the obstacle that prevented the success of the launch became profitable for the internal practice of truth, acceptance, and fairness.
That which impeded action thus becomes profitable to action, and that which blocked the road allows me to advance along the road.
That quote perfectly encapsulates this physics. The external world can only ever supply raw material for internal virtue. If your intention is pure, failure of external outcomes simply presents a new challenge for character development.
It creates a system where the individual always finds completion, even if the action is interrupted or fails.
Because the action is perfect in its essence and intention at each moment of its exercise, you have secured the only truly unseizable asset, an impeccable inner state.
Which brings us to the ultimate payoff, the zero-symmetry life. If the inner citadel is built on objective assent, radical acceptance of fate, and principled, non-posed action, well then the inner dialogue and the external reality must be perfectly congruent. There is no gap.
This is the highest state of integrity. The watchman strives for absolute internal consistency. He is content with two things: to accomplish the present action with justice, and to love the fate which has, here and now, been allotted to him.
There's no need for a secret life because there is nothing to hide.
And this coherence is rooted in truth, telling the truth both inwardly and outwardly. The guiding principle, the hegemonicon, coincides with universal reason. Your actions, your thoughts, your acceptance are all transparent, even to yourself.
And the metaphor of total disclosure, the forced, spontaneous revelation of the inner state, is what makes this state truly anti-fragile.
Yes, this tradition comes from the Cynic Episcopos, the overseer, or watchman, who was expected to live a life so transparently philosophical that his character could withstand any scrutiny.
So what happens when that spotlight finally hits the soul of the compromised?
For the corrupt, for those still holding that massive shadow ledger debt, total disclosure is an immediate, catastrophic death sentence.
Because when their interior state is revealed, when the light is shown on that vitiated and depraved reason, what's exposed?
All that's exposed is infantile rages, infantile games, and souls carrying corpses around.
It's brutal.
Lying, which is the necessary condition for maintaining the debt, is defined by the Stoics as an impiety that destroys the order of nature. The revelation of moral corruption is the absolute disaster for the indebted person because it proves the falsity of their entire structure.
All the power, wealth, and status they assigned infinite value to.
It instantly vanishes in the face of their bankrupt infantile character. The external crisis finally forces the settlement of a bill that always comes due.
Their house was built on sand, and the disclosure is the tide coming in. But for the watchman, the builder of the citadel, total disclosure is described as a promotion. Why?
Because there is nothing to fear. Their intention, which is the unique absolute value in Stoicism, is always pure. It's based on truth, justice, and temperance.
Right.
Marcus explicitly exhorted himself to carry out what is just, and whenever a representation presents itself, confine yourself to what corresponds exactly to reality. So when that inner state is revealed, there is no contradiction.
Only congruence.
Only congruence, virtue, and inherent quiet joy. The citadel is unseizable because there is nothing hidden to seize.
That's the strategic advantage. If your entire moral ledger is already public, if your inner intention matches your outer action, you are immune to blackmail, to scandal, to political attack. You are, quite literally, beyond reach.
And this internal alignment is what allowed Marcus, even while navigating the treacherous politics of the empire, to aim to live in what he called a free state.
He wasn't waiting for some ideal Platonic republic.
No, he mockingly referred to that in his notes as a fantasy.
He recognized that external circumstances don't matter nearly as much as your inner state. You build a republic inside yourself first.
He was constantly reminding himself of the chaos and frivolousness of the court, but he doubled down on his internal commitment. Wherever you can live well, meaning philosophically.
The ultimate act of integrity is maintaining that inner alignment.
Regardless of the turbulent political environment or the moral bankruptcy of your peers.
The lesson here for you, the listener, is that the ultimate strategic asset you possess isn't your portfolio or your network. It's the structural integrity of your character, built on zero symmetry.
And that structure, built using the three disciplines, means you are constantly operating in a state of prepared defense. You are anti-fragile because you have no debt to settle and no hidden life to be exposed.
So we began this deep dive, seeking a strategic analysis for survival in turbulent times, moving from abstract philosophy to practical physics, and we've established a clear architectural path for personal resilience.
We started with the foundational principle from Cicero, recognizing the mathematical debt incurred by ethical shortcuts.
Right, proving that prioritizing utility over honor creates structural liabilities that must eventually be paid.
We then turned to Marcus Aurelius to detail the construction of the Inner Citadel, defining it as the control tower of the soul, the only unseizable asset during systemic collapse, built on the radical power of objective judgment.
And this structure is maintained through the three disciplines: assent, desire, and action.
Which results in the zero-symmetry life. This achieves anti-fragility by converting every external obstacle, every challenge, every setback, every shock into a new opportunity for internal virtue.
The strategic conclusion for the learner here is, I think, profound. Moral good, when it's chosen and lived within the present moment, is an absolute of infinite value.
Because its perfection lies in the intention, not the duration or the outcome, so neither time nor any external factor can diminish it.
The philosophical watchman, by mastering the present instant, that moment of perfect integrity, can find completion and plenitude at each moment.
The action is perfect in its essence and intention, even if it's interrupted by the plague or by an execution. This is the strategic power of integrity. It makes you independent of time and external outcomes.
And yet, despite all this focus on eternal virtue and absolute value, Marcus Aurelius himself had to confront the vastness of time and oblivion.
He was constantly reminding himself of the transient nature of fame and memory.
Soon you will have forgotten everything. Soon everyone will have forgotten you.
And that reminder that nothing external lasts or really matters, it forces the focus back inward where true value resides.
So the ultimate measure of character isn't whether you are remembered by the fleeting world or whether your project succeeded externally.
But whether you can truthfully say, in that final, finite instant of zero symmetry living,